Changqing, farewell to Wang the 11th, traveling south. Through mist, across the wide river. Sleeves wet with tears, I watch and wave. Birds fly off, who knows where. Ahead, blue mountain desolation. A distant sail on the Yangtze River. A spring sunset at 5 lakes. Who is here to see on White Apple Island? A solitary, grieving figure. So, yet another pentasyllabic regulated poem by Liu Changqing, and just like the previous one we've read, the topic of this poem is the same, it's parting. So, Liu Changqing is saying goodbye to a man called Wang the 11th. I imagine 11th because he's the 11th member of his family. No other explanation is given about this character, and although the topic is the same as the previous poem, here the topic really is parting. In the previous one, that you will remember, seeing off Vice Censor-in-Chief Li, the topic was really the unrecognized service and merit of the great general that had been Censor-in-Chief Li and the decline in his life. On the contrary, the topic in this poem is purely and exclusively about parting, and it's focused on the sadness, the melancholy that Liu Changqing experiences when saying goodbye to a friend. You could say that there might be other minor topics, perhaps landscape description of the south of China, of the region of the Yangtze River Valley, but there's not that much description really, and the natural images that appear are catered, are subordinated to emphasizing, to illuminating the description of the feelings of sadness and melancholy that Liu Changqing is experiencing. So, after having said this, let's go couplet by couplet as usual. One thing I'd like to say is that the poem, at least in this translation, is very vague, very inspecific. So in this vagueness and lack of preciseness, it certainly echoes the original style, but it makes it particularly difficult for the reader to, understand what is happening, how to connect the different images, who is seeing or feeling what. Okay then, so first couplet. Through mist, across the wide river, sleeves wet with tears, I watch and wave. So the first couplet squarely situates Liu Changqing in a river, which is probably the Yangtze from references that appear later. And he is watching and waving. So he's saying goodbye. His friend has just parted in a boat. We have the conventional image of sadness, sleeves wet with tears. And we have the mist of the river, which is blocking the way. It's a wide river, but we might imagine that it's already difficult to see the parting friend because of the said mist floating over the waters. And I do remember, I think one of the first poems I commented in this series, which was also a poem about saying goodbye to a friend, also included this image of the all-enveloping mist. In that poem, it was clearly stated that the mist was blocking the view. Here, it's not really stated. In fact, from what later on comes in the poem, we might imagine that the mist is not completely obliterating the view of the departing friend's ship. Second couplet. So the first one locates us in time and space. We're at the river, parting is taking place, there is a misty background, and the poetic persona is feeling desolate, waving goodbye, crying. Birds fly off, who knows where. Ahead, blue mountain desolation. So the second couplet includes images of nature, birds flying, a blue mountain, but it includes them very much in line with the traditional Chinese correlative thought. The idea, the pathetic fallacy that nature and humankind follow the same cycles, influence each other, affect each other. So because the poetic persona is feeling sad, he will see nature inscribed in he will see sadness inscribed in nature, in the nature that surrounds him. The birds that are flying evoke or symbolize the friend that is parting as well. So where are the birds flying to? I have no idea. He knows, the poetic persona, where the friend is traveling to, but this image of birds going away intensifies the pathos. And there's a blue mountain ahead. Blue mountain could be, it has no negative or positive connotations. Green mountain, because we're in spring, I think there is an indication of spring later on. But blue mountain, desolation. Because the poem feels desolate, the blue mountain he sees ahead transmits feelings of sadness, of desolation, of emptiness. Next couplet. So the third couplet continues with landscape images, although in this case they are of water and of travel. So they clarify that we are in the Jiangtze River, and they clarify where Wang the 11th is traveling to, the Five Lakes, which is towards the eastern part of the Yangtze River Valley, in the old heartland of Chu. A distant sail on the Jiangtze River, a spring sunset at Five Lakes. So time has passed, we might imagine. What was a boat that was nearby just some moments ago is now a distant sail. The boat is plowing on, coursing on the Yangtze River Valley, getting further and further away from Changqing. And this is a spring sunset at Five Lakes. I imagine it's difficult to interpret this juxtaposition of images. A sail on the Jiangtze, a sunset, a spring sunset at the Five Lakes. This is a parallelistic couplet. So you have a strict correlation. Distance, I imagine spring, sail, sunset, Jiangtze, 5, river, lakes. I imagine what is presented here is the current position of Wang the 11th down the Yangtze River, already a distant sail, and the place he is heading towards. And he will probably is expected to reach the lakes area by sunset. So a spring sunset at Five Lakes. Right now, you are a distant sail on the Yangtze River. When the day comes to an end, when this spring day comes to an end, you will be approximately in the area of the Five Lakes. So he is extrapolating, the poet is extrapolating present and future locations for the traveling friend. And all in water. Finally, the conclusion, the last couplet moves us back to Liu Changqing. No, not to the traveler as the previous couplet, but now to Liu Changqing himself, alone and desolate, waving goodbye. Who is here to see on White Apple Island a solitary, grieving figure? So the image is pretty clear. So alone in this island from which his friend has parted by boat, nobody else around, complete, solitary, lonely pathos of saying goodbye to a friend and feeling lonely. In this White Apple Island, only one grieving figure remains. So it's an icon, a picture of loneliness, of sadness. The description of the island as White Apple Island is a bit peculiar. I've checked other translations, and most of them seem to prefer, they make no reference to apple. They generally describe this as White Duckweed Island. Duckweed, as you may or may not know, is an aquatic plant that grows on top of the water. It's called duckweed because ducks like eating it. And this white duckweed appears in a lot of Chinese poetry, with many symbolic meanings. So anyway, whatever those meanings, we're not going to stop on them or speculate about them, but in this island surrounded by weeds, remember, one meaning we can speculate is aquatic floating waters move around, so they tend to symbolize sometimes impermanence and movement and parting and things like that. So in this island, amidst the water plants, one grieving figure, like Lot's wife, a statue of salt, or Niobe, turned into stone and crying. Western images to convey probably the same image here of the scholar official, sad, crying, alone, while his friend goes on evermore forward. So, not a bad poem, a bit too conventional for my taste, and the image is too conventional and generic to become really, really meaningful. Although you could say that the grieving figure of the friend saying goodbye, or poet saying goodbye to a friend, is, pretty well sketched in this poem.